2. Skadi, the goddess of winter, hunting, and independence. Skadi's myth of marriage to Njord and her choice to live in the mountains speaks to her fierce independence and connection to nature.
Skadi.
Her story of revenge for her father and ultimate freedom is both powerful and inspiring. 3. The goddess of healing and medicine. While less prominent in myths, Yr's role as a protector of life and her connection to Viking healing practices offer a softer yet equally important energy. We can explore how...
Okay, I gotta pause you for now. I got some work to do. Welcome. If any of you are interested in going on this AI trip with me, it's like, I'm gonna have my book coming out this week. This is my kind of life's work. This is one I gotta just sort of apologize to. I know I've been like so distracted. I've been trying to like, and once I get this presentation out and get the quizzes up, and like I have the quizzes made, and honestly, it's just like a checklist of things that once I get it caught up, then everything will be good. And one thing I really want to say is like, I'm not the type of teacher that would ever like be sort of distracted like this at the beginning and then, oh, now your reflections are in, now I'm gonna mark them like super crazy hard as if I've been perfect. It's like, you're good people. Give me an honest effort and give me a little bit of benefit of the doubt, and I'll do the same to you, and it'll be awesome, right? Because it's like, this is a crazy world we're in now, and it's like, what do people need? People need a little bit of grace and a little bit of space to kind of be themselves and do their thing. Anywho, this is going to be an interesting week. I'll just say it to you. You're going to maybe see. Anyways, I'm releasing my book, Timeless Wisdom, which has been something I've been like not sleeping over for like a year. And it's I don't know why I'm deciding to, on the title slide of this presentation, give you a quick overview, but I'll just be super quick. It's like a study of 33 scholars everywhere from like Homer and Confucius and Buddha and Lao Tzu to like people in the even pre-Renaissance, like people like Aquinas and Galen and Virgil, and then like Enlightenment people like Francis Bacon. Oh, and then I obviously skipped over the classics like Plato and Socrates and Pythagoras and Aristotle, and then we move towards like the Enlightenment guys like Locke and Francis Bacon and Spinoza and David Hume and Kierkegaard and Popper, and then we start to move closer to now with like I kind of end with like Freud, Carl Jung, Adler, Ayn Rand, Durkheim, Camus, Bruce Lee is my last one. There's 33. So it goes from Homer to Bruce Lee. Each chapter is about 5 pages. I got about 80 unique, completely unique novel AI images in it. Anyways, it's going to be on Amazon, and if you think this is all like me trying to sell you my book, please don't. Please do not buy anything that I make. If any of you are interested at all, please just email me and I'll send you I can send you whatever you want. I could send you it as a Word doc, as a PDF, or as like a Kindle file, or as like a EPUB Mobi file, whatever kind of thing you use. Don't buy it. That's a conflict of interest if I'm trying to sell you my content. I'm not. Okay? I will give you anything you want. To be honest, in my mind, I'm trying to. My idea is to any student or family or friend that wants anything I'm giving, and then the only thing I'm selling is sort of to the broader public. And that's both that's both like a value alignment, but also conflict of interest. Like, it's just dirty to be like trying to sell my personal work to my students. That's like the definition of a conflict of interest. So I'm trying to share it. And anyways, I'm like burying the lead here. The lead is that I've also created an AI that goes with the book. And that's the cooler thing. I've actually created 2 AIs that go with the book. And one's designed to take someone like you and super deep dive. Say you've never heard of Spinoza. or David Hume. Spinoza pro-church, David Hume anti. Two heavyweights. Same time period, sort of. I made the whole book chronological. Okay, so now all of a sudden it's super dark in here because the background of the slide's black. Not. Yeah, I cut that slide off. I know it was like there was no volume for the last like 5 or 10 seconds. Honestly, those are the hardest slides to redo. Any slide where I'm like trying to be honest about something and talk, it's like for me to try to redo that slide, it's like I one took that like obviously that was like, it'd be almost impossible to perfectly mimic that glitch, right? But like I don't know. Redoing that slide would have like a fake element that I think would be worse than the glitch. So again, life's a series of trade-offs, right? What measuring trade-offs. And welcome to the first slide of today. Let's not get all deep and depressed because life's really not that bad. And I can be 43 and wear a Superman shirt that I bought at Walmart in Paris. I don't know, I'll stop. I'll lose the melody part. Because if my daughters see me doing this, they'd be terrified that I'm showing people that I'm singing. My daughter says my singing's terrifying, which I think is a hilarious way of saying I'm a bad singer. So, yeah, anyways, I was just going to say that I got this. We went to camp near Parry Sound. I didn't have enough clothes, so I ended up buying a whole bunch of like shirts at Walmart. So I have like, a Minion shirt. I have this shirt. I have like a Loki shirt. Anyways, early emotions start within the first 6 months of life. The main point I want you to get from this slide that's actually pretty cool and deep is that there's a difference between emotions that demand thought and emotions that don't. So like what do I mean by that is like think of if you look in the note of this slide, and all of you are probably at the point now where the easiest way would be if you just like download the PowerPoint, because a lot of the notes, it's like I'm not trying to like act like I'm super smart and pretend like all the notes are things that I've memorized. It's like they're the more kind of sciencey points, right? Those are the points. But then my approach as a teacher is not to teach you the points, it's to teach you the concept. And that's actually different because a concept's actually a collection of points. So I'm trying to teach you the idea behind this slide, not the specific things in there. Like, okay, so what am I mean? I mean, okay, so if you're making a note, make this list. The first 6 months of life, and then you say this is what you see: surprise, interest, joy, anger, sadness, fear, disgust. Now think about that for a sec. So early in life, the baby's able to show that they're surprised, they didn't think that was going to be there. They're sad because something's gone. They're interested in something. They're happy. They're scared. They're grossed out or disgusted. All of those are right in the moment reactionary emotions that help them show and engage their environment and show their See, I kind of stumbled myself into an interesting point of like, what do I mean show? Because the baby is showing. The baby's like doing behaviors because the interaction is immediately reciprocal. So the more that the baby smiles, the more that other people interact with it, and it's learning that smiling and increasing interaction go together. And babies that don't do that as much, people don't interact with as much. That's just statistically true. And it's like, so, and that's true even, to be honest with you, as an adult, you have probably a bit of a draw towards people that have a bit of a sense of humor, and sense of humor has always been is throughout human history been highly valued because it breaks tension, it does all kinds of stuff, it helps deal with difficult situations. Ever since the baby's little, It's looking more at people that are smiling more. It's disproportionately looking at faces that it finds more pleasing, which is interesting because that's showing like perception right away almost, right? Like, what's perception? Well, sensation is seeing the person, perception is preferring to look at the one that looks nicer. So that kind of stuff's right away, basically. But then, sorry, I haven't got to the second point. The second point is that the next level. So now think of something like being embarrassed. So if a 6-year-old dumps their cereal, they might be like, oh, surprised. They might even feel sad. They might feel mad. They might even cry about it. But they're not going to feel shame about it. They're not going to feel guilt. They're not going to feel embarrassed. If another baby sees that, they might cry too, but it's not psychological empathy. They're not jealous of the other baby the same way. Now, jealousy is a tough one, right? Because you could be like, well, wait a sec, because what if like a 5-year-old, two 5-year-olds are sitting there and you have like two pieces of licorice and you, or one piece of licorice and you give it just to the one, like, won't the other one be jealous? And it's like, well, that's like jealousy, but that's like a very in your face, getting less than the next person jealousy. I'm talking a little bit more about like jealousy, the way that like we would think of being jealous of someone as this like way that we're like dwelling over this like annoyed feeling of it's not fair. It's like basically what I'm saying is they're not having those deep thought-based emotions. Their emotions are reactionary. And that's actually a major difference because what that's actually telling you is they're not thought-based emotions to the same extent that this next list: jealousy, empathy, embarrassment, pride, shame, guilt. These later developing emotions have been called self-conscious or other conscious, right? So it just means like to feel embarrassed. If so, the example I sometimes use with my students in Kitchener is like if you're on an island by yourself and you do something very embarrassing, and then all of a sudden you look around and you're like, okay, no one saw that. I'm not hurt. I don't have to tell anyone that that happened. It's not as embarrassing. If you do that like at your graduation going across the stage and you like do some weird wipeout, and then it's embarrassing, right? Like, so the embarrassing is because you're aware of the socialness or of the perceived socialness or how you think people think of it later. Or it might not necessarily be people in the room, but it's like it's a socially embedded emotion. You guys are like, okay, we get it, we get it, we get it. Okay, so next slide. So this is like in some ways the most simple and the best definition in this course. That a feeling is something that happens to you when you're in a situation that's important to you. It's like, well, what's that mean? Well, okay, so say if you're only going to have a scared emotion if a situation to you is scary. You're only going to be happy if a situation to you is happiness causing. You're only going to be attracted to someone that you see as attractive. You're only going to have guilt if you do something that you would feel guilty about. It's like there's how much you care, and you all know that. It's like, think about if like the person that you really are in love with, you heard thinks that you're super, this is like such a mean example, but I'm just trying to be, thinks that you're super ugly. You're like, oh, that really hurts me. It's like, well, think of somebody that you hate thinks you're ugly. It's like, who cares what they think? See, that actually gets to a way deeper point that's really important for mental health. It's called the reference point. That basically means like we have to protect our reference point. And like the cooler way I would say that is you have to protect your, like, if you like the King Arthur kind of stuff, it's like you have to protect your Knights of the Round Table. You have to protect the group of people that you allow to talk into how you see yourself and who you care about. Because the studies on it are actually really interesting. So, for example, if I have like a close knit group of students that I feel really support me, and I have a wife and two daughters that support me, and my parents and my brother and sister support me, and something happens and there's like a lot of pushback against me and I have the support of my inner circle, the vulnerability of me to pressure is much lower. If my reference group is social media, then I'm a feather in the wind. So it's all emotion is a feeling or an affect, a felt emotion. Feeling, affect. It's like you say potato, I say potato. Occurs when a person's in a state or an interaction that's important to them, especially to their well-being, right? Like it's like, okay, so yeah, you're scared if you're watching a scary movie, but you're more scared if the lion's chasing you personally. It's like almost all emotions we would consider as either positive or negative at a base level. Now sometimes, and this is something that like kids get better at, and I actually have a good example of this because my daughter recently said to me, she was going to a sleepover at my mom's house, right? So like her grandma's. So at her grandma's was going to be her and my brother and my sister's kids, like Rosie and Olivia. So like the three girl cousins and my mom and my dad was gonna be there too. But my dad was probably gonna be like upstairs watching hockey or something. My mom had like basically made the basement sort of into like a little movie theater, and they all had their little sleeping area. My mom was gonna sleep in the spare room down there, and blah blah blah. And my daughter, we're about to go in, she's like, Daddy, I want to go, but I'm really scared and nervous. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that for a sec. Do you think that maybe like you're excited, but also like because you're expecting a lot, it's also like kind of making you nervous, excited? She's like, yeah. And it's like, okay, well, do you think maybe you're nervous, excited more than scared? She's like, yeah. And it's like, okay, well, and that's actually kind of complicated for a kid to understand that they can be two things at the same time, that they can be scared and or excited and nervous, right? It's like, well, think of like a first date. It's like you could be going on a first date with someone and be nervous about it and also want to do it, right? So it's like the ability to understand that even though emotions can be positive and negative, you can also have positive and negative aspects of the same emotion in a way, right? So like you could have fear of staying in a bad habit and you could also have positive fear almost. So that could also like that could push you away from it, and it could also push you towards something more because you're using it as an energizing motivator. That was a complicated example that kind of got a bit meta, but it's like even within the emotion there's the bidirectionality potential in some scenarios, which is a topic for a different day. Okay, self-conscious emotions don't come until after the first year of life and tend to be influenced by biology and experience. So now think of what that's really saying, right? Biology and experience, just another one of the million of ways to say nature nurture. So your emotions are influenced by your genetic inheritance and the world you're born into. You're a you're a human in a world. It's like you're always a thing in the world. You're always a thing in the world. You're always a nature and a nurture. You're always in a nature that nurtures is the better way to say that actually. Okay, next slide. Okay, so and just to double back for a half second here is like that idea I said before about for you as the students to kind of focus on the points, and what I'm going to do as the teacher try to focus on explaining the concept in which those points live, sort of, I think is more my specialty than just being a slide reader. All my notes are in the slide extra note. I put a bunch of time into like doing that, and you'll notice I kind of in the second half of the course I back off a bit, but with the in note slides. And one of the reasons for that is once we get to like kind of the teenage years, a lot of the ideas become more conceptual and applied and a little bit less. There's still like the growing brain and we're still going to have some of the physical cognitive component for sure. But the presentations are a bit more like this. And by this I mean like a little bit more chapter 4-ish than chapter 3-ish. And basically I'm just rambling about this idea that I think I finally found a way to say it, that if you focus sort of on the points, I'll focus on the concept that embeds the points, right? So here what we're saying is that this whole what relationship is. So think of like if we do an origins movie about a character like the Wolverine from X-Men. It's like, well, what's origin? Origin's where it came from, where that character comes from. What's the backstory? What's the backstory about relationships? that actually the backstory of our relationships is that we had a first relationship, and that first relationship taught us a lot, and how much in sync we were with that person that was our first relationship, how in sync and how reciprocal it was, how back and forth, how good a fit that was, right? Were we really needy and our mom more distant, or were we more easily overstimulated and our mom really overstimulating, or was the match pretty good? It's like the Goldilocks idea, like is it too much or too little or just right? It's like that's the hardest thing about teaching, or not teaching, sorry, I meant to say parenting, is that finding that Goldilocks principle, right? If you haven't heard anyone say that before, the Goldilocks principle is like a great metaphor, and it's used all the time, and it's used in all kinds of fields, and it's also used in things like finding planets that could support life. Like, how would you find something like Earth? It's like Earth's actually way more rare than people think. People think there's like so many Earths. It's like, yeah, there's maybe like a life. I have no idea, but it's Earth's something very specific, and too much or too little. Again, I'm just trying to explain the Goldilocks principle, not get into some wild planet comparison rant. So, in that interaction, the most effective tool the baby has is crying. If a baby's crying was rhythmic and smooth and not annoying, you wouldn't wake up. You wouldn't help them. Their survival likelihood would be much lower. Crying is the most important mechanism a newborn has for communicating with their world. It's their initial vocalization. It's also building that whole apparatus, would be the cool science word. But that just means like, well, why can a parrot, I've probably already said this to you, but why can a parrot talk and not a chimp? A chimp's smarter than a parrot. It's like, well, again, we've for a long time underestimated avian intelligence. But anyways, a parrot has the vocal capacity. It literally has the throat mechanics specs that it can do it, and a chimp doesn't. A chimp can just do sign language. A chimp can get to like grade 4 in sign language. The gap between a chimp and a smart human is intellectually probably way bigger than you think, unless you've like studied it specifically. Like, because people think, oh, chimps are like the next smartest, but it's like, again, now I'm getting way off point. I think there's arguments to be made that the next smartest is either the most misnamed animal of all time, and it's like the sperm whale, right? It's like the biggest brain toothed whale. And the reason I say that is because animals that hunt their food and kill their food to eat need smarter brains in general. Most of the big brained animals are hunters. Now I know people are immediately jumping to, well, what about elephants and gorillas? And I see your point. But that would demand a much longer discussion. Okay, anyways, let's keep going here. Okay. So yeah, so sorry, that was a kind of weird way to end the last slide, but I just gotta say, it's like, you remember when you were a kid and you'd have those conversations, it's like, well, what would win in a fight between like a gorilla and like a Kodiak grizzly bear? And it's like, those conversations are fun, but always put your money on the one that has to kill its own meals, like a polar bear basically, over almost anything. Bengal tiger maybe, but it's like, those are all just hypotheticals, right? The only way you could ever test that would be to create some incredibly cruel, unreal situation where you put them in a pen together, and in that scenario, that's disgusting, and I wouldn't even watch it, because it's like, it's basically torture, right? Because they're gonna fight, and one of them's gonna get killed, and one of them's gonna get almost killed. And I should probably restart the slide, because this is a super weird rant to go on. But what I'm saying is, like, because my brain can't help but go to that point of like, well, you can actually do it, but theoretically it's interesting. The toughest animals in the world are definitely things like polar bears, grizzlies, the biggest of the big tigers, maybe some of the meanest lionesses, dolphins, the wolves of the ocean. So yeah, so there's time now to get to the slide. Biological and environmental influences. So this is actually pretty interesting that a kid that's born blind. So this depends on like if they've ever, because obviously there's blindness is really complicated because a kid can be born blind. A kid can also be born with impaired vision. And then people can develop blindness in degenerative conditions that would be more considered like a syndrome or a disease or something like that, or an illness. Blindness can also get caused by weird things like exposures to certain chemicals. There's even certain plants that can, and you can look it up. I can't think of the name, and I'm going to go on a rant if I try to think too much about it, but it's like there are plants in England. There's plants that if you were to like rub the leaf and then touch your eye, you could go blind. So there's like, but that's not how most people go blind. Most people go blind either from something that is a condition or an injury. Or an injury that is to one eye, and then the optic nerve gets infected and they lose both. So let's just assume, let's take that Mike's weird 3-minute intro rant to the side a sec, and let's just say the kid's born blind. Now, what's interesting here is that they smile. So say if the kid's born blind and then you do something like you like tickle them or you like say something in a cute voice, they'll smile. They will also frown when they're upset. So that's actually pretty interesting, right? Because why should you care about that? Well, that's interesting because they're doing something without seeing other people do it. So a blind baby is actually in a way the only way we could ever test that idea, because if a blind baby's smiling without having seen anyone else smile and frowning without ever seeing anyone else frown, that means that smiling and frowning are not learned. They're instinctive responses to positive and negative experiences. I'm going to try this new approach of going a little more concept based and like letting you kind of do the slide, right? And I'll kind of be sitting here. I just realized I'm like totally dressed like I'm going to play pickup basketball. Sorry, but anyways, I'm just coming to you live. Not live at all. Coming to you pre-recorded from Kitchener. My segues are the worst. So any parent or anyone that's been around babies knows that there's differences in cries, right? So you can have these written down quick if you want, but when I'll give you an example that's too personal. Monday mornings are hard for me in a way because it's my only, so I teach this class to this group, and then I teach full-time at Conestoga. So I teach Monday morning, I have a Zoom class, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday I have classes in person. But my Monday morning Zoom class is at 8, which is kind of fine. Like, and my students in that class are awesome, and it's only about 25 students, and it's 8 to 11. The complicating factor is that my wife and 2 kids leave the house at about 8:20, right? So there's this like overlap. The reason I'm telling you all this, say I'm starting my class and it's like 8:10 and I can hear my 2 daughters up in the kitchen. There's a certain cry sound I could hear that even though I'm teaching a class, I would leave everything and immediately run upstairs. Like you can probably guess I'm talking about the pain cry, right? So the point I'm trying to make here while you're writing this down is just this idea that like even within crying, there's distinguishable different vocalizations that happen that once you're exposed to it for a long period of time, I can tell when my daughter Charlotte, for example, right now, because Evie's 8. She cries sometimes, but it's the example's easier with my 3-year-old. I can tell that when she's crying because she's hurt versus when she's crying because she's not getting what she wants versus when she's crying because her older sister Evelyn, her older sister, is doing something that's annoying her versus when she's crying because she's just tired and kind of annoyed and whiny. And it's like those aren't, I want you to view those as different vocalizations from the kid that doesn't yet have words. Right? That this is, as the kid's getting older, you're starting to actually see, in a lot of cases, more variety in the cry, is a way to think of it. And you look at, well, what is a cry? It's like, well, what is talking? What's the difference between, and just so it's not hard on yours, what's the difference between me talking like this and me talking like this? It's like, well, the only difference is when it sounded like I was yelling is I just pushed more air out at the same time. Right? And it's like, that's why I like the anger cry, is it's just a basic cry with more air forced through the throat, the vocal cords. It's like the difference between me saying, Evie, come here, and Evie, come here, like yelling it, is amount of voice. That's actually one important rule about parenting, though, by the way, that I'm learning and trying to really put into practice, even though it's so hard, is like, if my daughter's upstairs doing something I don't want her to be doing, to actually like take a pause, go up and talk to her, not just be like, Evie, 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 and then by the time, like, it takes like 5 times for her to hear me, she's like, what, and then we're like both annoyed by the time we even start the conversation. So that's like one huge thing, is like, go up to their physical presence. Like, I don't mean get in their face, but I mean like, I'm trying to reduce my parenting from a different floor in the house, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Cause, you're my therapist, and I don't know why I'm like giving all these real. It's okay. So there's almost like, here we go again. But it's one of the tough things of teaching online without students live with you, is that you either go robot form, or it's hard to like balance the. So I'm kind of trying to treat this like I'm like almost like a YouTuber making YouTubes just for you, and I know I am putting it on YouTube, but I'm like, I'm not. I'm trying to at least for the moment, I'm still doing that plan, but it's mainly just an ease thing. YouTube makes everything so much easier because you can put massive files on it and it doesn't care at all, and it just handles all the details, right? It's like putting things on Blackboard's just such a pain. I need to do it with like, anyways, it's like a file size limit thing. Blah blah blah. Next slide. Sorry, my daughters hate when I say blah blah blah. You guys probably do too. It's good having, the one good thing about having like an 8-year-old daughter is she just tells me every single thing that I do that's annoying. So I'm actually kind of at least decently conscious of my annoyingness, and trying to work on it. So here's it's interesting because I'm teaching my Kitchener students about psychology related stuff too, and we were talking about this idea a while ago, that there's a smile that a baby does. Okay, so for example, a baby, he starts, and this is super cute if you're a parent, like a baby starts like smiling and stuff, and even frowning, but you notice the smiling more in their dreams, like almost right away. Like the dream smiling happens pretty early, right? And we'd say that there's like a reflex to smile. Now this is interesting because it's like it's more than it's so much more deep than people think, right? So like, why would a baby smile? Well, okay, what happens when you say, "Hey, buddy," and I won't do too much of that, but and you like give a baby a tickle and they like smile and laugh. It's like, well, then you probably do it a bit more. And then what actually that baby's smiling is actually giving you positive reinforcement, and it's actually a social stimulant. And what I mean is, in a positive way, that it's a back and forth reciprocal bonding situation that's happening. It's a reflex. Remember, you might want to add this to your notes specifically. This is what I was going to say. I was talking to my students about not the social smiling, but what reflexes are. and that reflexes are actually wild, because a reflex is a behavior that you didn't learn. What? If I slap my hands right in front of your face really loud, you're gonna blink. You're gonna instinctively try to protect your eyes. And again, instinctively is another word for reflex, sort of. A reflex, I guess, is a type of instinct. Or is an instinct a type of reflex? No, a reflex is a type of instinct. So then you'd blink, right? You and every other human on the planet, except for maybe people that have trained not to do that. So like, what do I mean by that is like maybe certain boxers, because I know boxers, like this will be annoying, but like if you're a boxer, you have to have somebody doing this to you like all the time, because you have to get I just like boxing. You have to get like in your mind the idea of what punch is gonna hit you and what punch isn't gonna hit you. Basically, you have to learn range, is how it would be said. But like, so but what I'm saying is you could train yourself not to do it, but by default you do it, aka reflex. So reflexing, I say there the smiling's within the first month. Social smiling, comes as early as 2 months. So now what a social smile is, this is exactly what it sounds like. It's like or dad or aunt or something's doing something with the baby, and the baby's smiling, and it's like in that social situation. So it comes a little bit different, a little bit later, but so my point is, you almost have to view smiling as two things. Super important signal mechanisms, though. These are before the baby can talk. The baby's basically saying, I like you, to the person in their environment, which is shaping how much they're interacting with them. It's like, again, I'm trying to make this point that like crying and smiling are advanced communication mechanisms for an early stage developing social brain. Okay, so this is a tough topic in a way. I just want you to have the idea that fear usually isn't can be demonstrated by babies usually as young as 6 months. Now, in scenarios of abuse, in scenarios of extreme neglect, in scenarios of the type of stuff that makes me be careful about how I say what I'm saying, we can see examples of babies displaying fear as young as 3 months, which is devastating to say that a baby in a terrible scenario can actually display the ability to show fear twice as early, basically, as a regular baby. A baby not in that terrible situation is, I guess, an example of the negative power of negative situations. But in most scenarios, a baby doesn't usually display fear of things, because this is the thing, is like, to display fear, you have to be able to say, well, like, it's one thing to show fear in the moment. It's another thing to like be afraid of somebody or something because of something before. That demands a certain amount of brain power, basically, right? Like the baby's not, because now we're getting into a question of like how actively engaged is the baby's long-term memory and working memory. Like how much is the baby using past experiences? And it's like, well, the baby's not really doing that until like 6 months. But if the baby's in a situation where it's under a stress pressure level where, and it's like, well, why does that like interfere with development so much? Well, because you could see how if that's like all of a sudden becomes a priority, that's like redirecting resources, and it's like the baby's in this traumatic experience early, trying to make sense of it and trying to get through it and trying to do things that it's not cognitively anywhere near evolved to do yet. The most frequent type of fear that kids show is stranger anxiety, which makes complete sense and is completely logical from an evolutionary perspective, and every animal shows it. It's like, just take a different animal species for 1 second and it makes total sense. Obviously, like a wolf pup is gonna hide from males that aren't its dad, and ones that don't do that die. And that's true with bears, and that's true. It only gets socially awkward and like political or whatever when we talk about humans, because everyone has this like layer of we're not animals, we're conscious thinking animals, and then Freud shocks everyone saying you're more biology than you'd like to think, and then everyone, says he's crazy when he's not. So at about 9 months, strangers often fear um, more intensely, escalates to about the first birthday. Now, I want to make this point that one of the reasons why, and this is a part that people don't always throw into this, one of the reasons why the kids getting more and more scared and aware of strangers is because their vision's getting better. By 6 months, their vision's 20/40. By 9 months, their vision's 20/20. Right? So 20/40 means that a baby at 20 feet can see what an adult with perfect vision can see at 40 feet. 20/20 means that from 20 feet we basically say the same thing, and I forget if it's feet or meters, but that's basically the idea. So students always think this is interesting and always have kind of examples or things to think about around this when I talk about it in person. That one of the interesting things about stranger anxiety, and I'll let you get these points and I'll just kind of talk, is that the situation matters. So I'll just give you an example. So for example, my brother doesn't even look a ton like me, but he kind of talks like me and acts like me, and I noticed both my daughters bonded with him very easily. And the argument here to make is that some of it is that he's giving similar signals to what they're used to. Now, so down here in this room, if I was to like flip the camera around, I would maybe throw off everything, but let me just do it for interest's sake. So like on this side of the room, you'll see over here is like a couch and like a chair and the TV and stuff, and you can see, oh man, yeah, we had to do some water work. Still gotta fix the ceiling because we put a shower in our room right above here. Okay, anyways, why am I talking about this again? Oh yeah, so the idea is that like, okay, so say if over on the couch there my daughter's sitting there, and then my brother comes in and we like hang out for a second, then my daughter can like see us talking, and it's in a place where she's comfortable and she has her toys, and maybe my other daughter's in there too, and like the stranger anxiety in that scenario is way low. But let's say I run into somebody I don't know at the mall when I'm with my daughter, and it's like a crazy scenario and there's tons of people. The stranger anxiety is way higher. So it's like, so what matters? So it's like, say for example, that third point I just caught my eye. Like, if my daughter's also sitting on my lap when my brother comes in the room, she's going to be less anxious, because it's like, and if she was on the couch and my brother came in, she'd probably come over to me anyways, right? That's a proximity seeking behavior that is actually a good thing. If that happens, that's a sign that she's able to see me as like a safe home base, right? Like ideally what you would want is her to be able to come over to me, get calm enough in the situation, and then go back to whatever she was doing. And then when she goes back to whatever she's doing, that's almost a signal that she was able to use my proximity to reduce her anxiety enough to get back to functionally what she was doing before. Yeah, and so that's kind of links with that fourth point, that even secure, like, so that'd be a secure attachment, right? A secure attachment, think of secure and security as being the same word. It's like, what is that? It's like, so say my brother comes in, that example, my daughter comes over, and this is what I'm trying to say. You're all smart people. You can write down these points. I'm trying to hit you at the concept level because, I don't know, I'm trying to just respect your high level intelligence. It's like, what am I really trying to say? And what I'm trying to say is, my daughter comes over, I basically, through our interactions, show her that she's still safe, even though the environment's changed with this addition of another person. And then she goes back to her play. And then we would call that a secure attachment. Why? Because we'd say that she was able to use me as a source of security and basically get back to her thing. Right, and then this is kind of getting ahead of myself. It's getting into like attachment theory, but then the idea would be that like insecure and avoidant and resistant attachments would be when she's not able to use me as a safe home base. So it's insecure. It's not security providing enough to reduce her anxiety enough to get her back playing to a pre-anxiety raised state, if that makes sense. So who the person is, where you are matters. So you'll notice if you're following the PowerPoint that the video I did, I pulled one point off, and that's actually a technical mistake. I want you to have that in your notes. So the point is that I'll just say it here verbally for you, and then I'll explain. Basically, it was just that when I did the recording, I saved the file and I forgot there was one more point, and and if I leave it there, then it messes up the video. So the easiest way to do it is just to delete that point and just verbally explain it. So all I said basically was that kids have less stranger anxiety towards other kids. Right now, let's go back to the wolf example to just make that make sense, right? What's that really saying? Well, what it's saying is that the baby cub, the baby wolf cub, or the wolf pup, I'm just double saying the word, the wolf pup is less afraid of other wolf pups than it is of other wolf dads and moms. And some of that's just a size thing. And some of that's an ingrained genetic behavior, right? Like getting into what ingrained genetic behaviors are, this idea that genetics aren't just your hair color, it's also it affects you at a behavioral and an intellectual level is like complicated, but not true. Or yeah, not true. That was a successful double negative. Okay, so let me make sure I get all my points on this one. So social referencing is just kind of what it sounds like. So it's like the baby using the person in their environment to help them understand their situation. So the best example is like my daughter now. It's like if she does something and I laugh and she thinks it's funny and she sees that I think it's funny, then it's hilarious. Like my 3-year-old's a good example of social referencing, that she's looking to me largely to help her understand if things are funny, if things are dangerous, if things are safe. So there, it's like she's reading the emotional cues in me, right? Like to give an example, if we're walking down the street and there's like an alleyway and there's like a toy, but it looks kind of sketchy, she might look at me, and if I'm like, she'll like keep going, or if I'm like, yeah, then she'll like go, right? It's like, and that wasn't the greatest freestyled example, but my point is just that she's looking to me. She's, in that case, I'm the social, and she's referencing me to help her understand the situation. And that can actually be really helpful in helping the kid. I say they're like modulate, or modulate's just a fancy way of saying control their emotions, right? And then I put there like the most obvious statement of all time, that infants are affected by fatigue, hunger, time of day, where they are, and the people around them. But it's like that's another thing. It's like before you assume that the kid's behaving poorly, like are they super tired? Are they fed? Is it the end of the day? It's like my kid's behavior goes down the tubes at like 7:30 or something, and it's like, well, some of that's just that they're tired. If they haven't eaten well, if they've eaten way too much junk food, if they've been around people that have been stimulating them all day, like if they've been like outside playing all day with their cousins and then everyone's gone, there's going to be a bit of a crash. So it's like to treat that behavior as if it's just existing in a vacuum is just missing the full gestalt or the full story. Infants need to learn or adapt to different contexts that demand them to be able to sometimes control situations. So like one of the things you're doing as a parent is sort of coaching their emotional skill set, right? And then I just have that last point that as the kid's getting older, the parents are sort of modifying their expectations, and that's true too. It's like the same kind of emotional reaction Charlotte has, that's 3. If my 8-year-old's having that, that's like that's an well, that's why we would call that a temper tantrum. If an 8-year-old's doing it, if a 3-year-old's doing it, it's sort of still a temper tantrum, but we would look at it very differently because we would expect more of the 8-year-old. Okay, so here we get into an interesting idea of like what is, and I know you've heard the word personality a million times, so how do I even tell you it in a different way? But I like to talk about it as style of people, right? What's personality? It's just saying that, like, okay, well, we know that 99% of our genetics is the same, and I don't care what your race or height, weight, look, culture, geographic origin. It's like every Homo sapien shares about 99% DNA. Every genetic difference exists in that last like 1% or so. So, but that 1% is huge. And we have such differences in people. And what does it mean if you say, let me change directions a tiny bit. What if you went on a date and you come home and your friend's like, how'd that date go? And you go, I didn't like this guy's personality. What's that mean? Right? Like, okay, so obviously if you say like, oh, I thought this guy was ugly, or I thought this guy was rude, or I thought this guy was, mean, or wasn't interesting, or whatever, that's like understandable, easy. You didn't like his personality. What's that mean? Well, you didn't like the style of person that they are, which really means their patterns of handling emotions, their patterns of understanding the world, and their patterns of behaving. You didn't like the person's patterns. If you don't like someone's personality and patterns, the patterns aren't just like their behaviors and how they think and how they talk. It's also how they interact with you and how they interact with other people and how they interact in a room and it's like when this person comes, it always like kind of wrecks the situation. It's like, well, part of that's how they're acting, part of that's their behavior, part of that's their emotional, how they're seeing themselves, their style of being a person. Okay, so I like making this point to people. So say if you think a baby's not really born with personality, a baby's not doing some of those things I just said. A baby doesn't yet really have habits of making sense of things, and of a lot of these habits are still at a pre-developmental stage. But that's not to say that not pre-developmental, at an early developmental stage, um, at a pre-personality stage. And what a pre-personality stage would be called is temperament. So the idea is that a baby's born with. Now, this makes more sense if you think of like six babies, right? You could say like these six babies um, that are all okay. Since I'm freestyling this, let me change my example because six, now I'm in like some weird scenario. Like, did one woman have six? Or are we talking about multiple moms? Let's just say one mom that had triplets. Okay, let's make this example a little more easy. Now, those kids are going to be different, even if they look the same. But let's just pretend. Let's take the physical piece out of it, the appearance piece out of it. So those three triplet daughters, right? we they're going to be different. Some of them are going to be more active, some of them are going to play for longer, some of them are going to be more scared of stuff, some of them are going to be more bold and less scared of stuff. And we wouldn't say that they have different personalities. What we would say is those kids have different temperaments. And temperament plus parenting equals personality is kind of the equation that I'm trying to present to you. That personality is your pattern of responding to people and objects in your environment. That's actually a decent definition. It sounds like it's basic, but it's like that's actually what makes you different than someone else, is how you respond to the people and things in your world and the patterns of that. And that's everything from like what you think is attractive and scary to what you think is stressful and how you respond to that, and what you think is interesting and how you respond to that, and what you think is worthy of respect and how you respond to that, and what you think is worthy of disgust and how do you respond to that. And that there's a patternness to that. You're not just random. You're not just a random actor. You have a person style, and that person style even has like a way that it thinks of itself, and we would call that an identity. Right? But you're not your identity. You're not your personality. That's the biggest teaching of Carl Jung and of psychology. You're yourself. This self, this self, this perceiver of, or no, take out the word perceiver. Your witness. It's like yourself is what has thoughts, has emotions, engages in behavior, feels emotions, contemplates itself. Itself. So temperament, you're born with a temperament to a certain learning environment, parents or family situation, and the interaction of those two develop into what we're then going to call personality as the kid starts to get older. Yeah, between slides, I just ran upstairs to fill up the coffee, and I just was thinking, like, just wanted to say I really do enjoy making these videos for you students at Nipsing. Like, I know sometimes I seem a bit panicky and a bit like apologetic. And I hate being like that. Like, oh, sorry, I'm so late, blah 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 blah. But at the same time, I don't want you to be sitting there like not knowing what I'm doing. So, um, sometimes I will send messages like that. But I just want you to know that like, um, no, I do very much enjoy it. And I think especially like once this week, once I get kind of caught up, and by this next Friday, I think I'll have everything. Like I'll have this out today, and then the second part either late tonight or tomorrow, and then I'll have your normal stuff for Friday or for that week at that point, and I'll get the tests and blah blah the quests. I'll get everything that you probably know is waiting coming, and then I'll put out like a video that kind of explains everything and hopefully get everyone on the same page. And then moving forward from there, we should be rolling. Um, and the reason I'm just saying that is because it is fun talking about these concepts. This is kind of interesting. Like, okay, so Chess and Thomas, they're basically just saying this idea, and this is like kind of dated language in a way. But I included this because it's important for you to know, because you'll hear people say stuff like this, and it's really like, um, I want to really make the point that this is obviously not saying like good and bad kids. It's just saying like, I'll just be honest, like my 3-year-old is just easier than my older kid. And it's like, well, if you ask me like, what do I mean by that? It's like kind of like what the slide says. She's just like usually in a good mood. She kind of goes with the flow better. It's easier usually to get her to change. Now, today's a bad example because today it was a nightmare because I was trying to get them to. Sometimes when I get really busy, I like try to basically bribe my wife to like, hey, this would be, can I pay for, can I send you guys to the library for, there's an exhibit today. Um, yeah, they call marriage is skilled diplomacy, right? So anyways, uh, some kids are like, that's dumb to say, but some kids are like more, um, difficult. Like my older child was like, say for example, going to bed was like always such a nightmare, whereas my youngest is like, it's easier. And then my oldest is like kind of sort of warm. That's another good word, which just means sort of this idea of like there's a lot of kids that take a bit longer to kind of bond or to get engaged, but once they do, kind of perform more generally like what would be considered an easy child. So this is kind of just like more how much the kid is like able to sort of roll with situations, and how much does it sort of knock them off their position, right? Like, say for example, for Evie, if there's going to be certain people coming on the trip, and then all of a sudden they're not coming, and there's these other people coming, it's like that would really throw her off, where Charlotte wouldn't care less. So it's not that one's a good kid and one's a bad kid. It's just that like you could see the kid that really cared about that being like a little bit more difficult to like deal with all these situations, right? It's just they're just having it's just more difficult. More reacting negatively, more crying, more problems with the regular routine, like I was just saying there, and more difficulty with changing situations. So again, notice how this isn't saying like types of people. This is just saying like almost like, well, you can see the relationship between the word temperament and temperature, right? A temperature is a measurement of how hot or cold something is. It's like um, your your temperament is basically, it's obviously like a kind of a play off the same word. The kids are born almost at different temperatures, different than is better than saying with different personalities. Again, there's a limit to how useful the specific word breakdown is as a conceptual metaphor. But next slide. So if I was going to try to say to you that um, kids don't have different personalities, but they're born different, and the way that they're born different is what we call temperament. And I could actually create like a temperament scale, and I could get you to fill in and score kids, let's say from 1 to 100, with 1 being low and 100 being high on these 5 dimensions. And we could use their scores on these 5 dimensions to make, in this theoretical scenario, 5 different groups, and we would say that those groups are significantly different than each other. It's like, okay, well, what's on that checklist? Well, first of all, we're going to look at activity level. That's the most basic one. And just don't think about this necessarily as like a bunch of different kids. Like if you go back to my original example of like a mom that has triplets, it's like, well, some one of those kids might be more active than the other one, and one might be kind of in the middle, and one might be like a little bit more like, for lack of a better word, lazy or just like not as active. And then they might be also different in how much positive emotion they have, right? Some kid might get into everything. Like my daughter Charlotte. All right, sorry. I know that end of that slide buckled a little bit, but sounded like I just had a mic drop moment after ripping on Charlotte. But no, okay, so inhibition now. Okay, so this is like the opposite of approach, right? So if Charlotte's getting into everything, there might be another kid or one of the other. I don't know why I'm keep trying to force this triplet metaphor, but let's just drop it. There could be another kid that's like more nervous of that. So I say they're the flip of approach, the opposite sort of. This that some kids are more withdrawn or more naturally pulled back, and that this actually seems to be statistically linked to likelihoods to develop shyness later in childhood, and even social anxiety related issues, which are obviously not the same as shyness, but not completely different. Again, that's like a whole other complicated conversation, but there does seem to be a link between inhibition early in life, shyness in the childhood, preteen, and social anxiety later. I think if you think about that, that makes sense. They're not the same thing. They're manifestations of the same unease. That there's a negative emotion. Oh, number four, negative emotionality, right? So this is like, okay, well, so what are we saying so far? You can give them a score on how active they are, how much they approach new things, how scared they are with new things, which you can call inhibition, how much negative emotion like crying and fussing and whining and all that kind of stuff that we associate with like a kid misbehaving that they're doing. And then the fifth one that's interesting is like task persistence. So think of that as like, my best example for this is my older daughter. She used to draw, and like it was almost like this is like during pandemic and stuff too, but she could sit and really work on a drawing for like a half an hour, which for like a little kid is wild. Like my daughter now, it's like she's like a couple minutes, couple minutes, like activity to activity, right? Like, but my older daughter had way more attention, right? And you realize that actually it takes effortful control of your mind, which we'll, like as they get a bit older, call attention, to stay doing the same thing, to stay focused. Yeah, manage your attention, not be constantly novelty seeking. So again, sorry for some of these glitches. Like the problem with PowerPoint is it is a bit glitch happy. If I recorded in like Zoom, there would be no glitches. But then the problem with that is that there's a major disadvantage of then I'm basically trying to live shoot the whole thing, and I don't know. I find the ability to shoot slide by slide is just worth a bit of the hiccup because I think it lets me stay more focused, lets me take like little mini breaks and stuff, and I don't know. It takes the pressure off, to be honest, because I can just redo a slide if I don't do it well, or not. It's not that I'm doing them all well, but if I make like a, a do slide over level air. So yeah, PowerPoint's basically as good as I can get at this point. Um, I think since I started doing so much AI stuff, I got to figure out how to get my background stuff turned more off because I think that might be some of the glitchiness. But where does temperament come from? Okay, so this is just getting to this question, right? So the origins and stability, that's like a boring way of saying where does it come from, and is it stable means like does what we find as differences between kids in temperament show us anything about what those kids are going to be like later, right? Like, so that's what stability means. Like, because if I said the kids are different in temperament and we can measure that and that helps us understand the kids are different, but that's about it, then that's like kind of interesting. But if we say that like temperament scores are actually linked to things later, then that shows that there's some stability in that measurement. which is just me trying to explain why the word stable is there. When you're talking about measuring variables, stable means like, is it something that lasts over time? So let me give you a better example. Self-esteem. Self-esteem is stable in the short term and not stable in the long term. What that means is if you have low self-esteem today, you'll probably have low self-esteem next Sunday. But I have almost no statistical knowledge if 2 years from this Sunday you'll have self-esteem issues still or not. Because people's self-esteem scores change over the long term, which if someone's dealing with self-esteem issues is good news. It's basically saying that if we gave you a score every day to day, your scores would seem similar. But the longer we make the time span, the less predictive it becomes. And that's me taking almost 3 minutes in the slide to get past just describing the title of the slide. So, okay, this is trying to look at why the kids are different. Well, some of it is because they inherited different things from their parents. And we know this is true, for example, because identical twins are more alike in temperament than fraternal ones. So twins coming literally from the same egg are more like each other than twins that are coming from two separate fertilized eggs. Our adult levels of personalities tend to support this idea. So like, for example, things like kids that are high in shyness tend to also be high in neuroticism later, or just this tendency towards negative emotionality. Everyone gets triggered by the word neuroticism, but that's actually the correct word, which means the experience of emotions that are the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, as opposed to psychosis, which are more delusional. And it's dated language, but it's the original language of psychiatry and psychology. So there's a heredity piece. There's also a neurological piece. There's a brain, which basically means there's like what you inherited is number one, heredity. Neurological means people's brains are just acting differently. That we know that people that are shy are just processing situations differently. They're not having a reaction that you don't have, but they're having it cued easier than you. So say if there's someone that's really shy and then someone that's not really shy. Say I'm not really shy and I can talk on this fine and I could talk in front of 40 people fine, but 400 people I'd start being shy. You might get that shy in front of two people. If you're that shy in front of two people and I'm that shy in front of 400 people, if you immediately erase the outside world and just looked inside both our bodies, we're both having the same reaction. Just what the threshold of social pressure needed to cause that reaction was different. And for a shy person, it's just lower. So they're having a normal person's shy reaction, but easier almost, if that makes any sense. That's what the word threshold means, that there's a different threshold. Threshold means the point in that temperature scale or whatever I'm trying to do with my hands, that once you get past that, you're shy, you're embarrassed, or shy specifically means like being so over aware of yourself in a situation that it starts to impact function. I guess, I don't know, that's a decent freestyle definition. We know that it affects things like dopamine and serotonin, which shouldn't surprise anyone. Those are neurochemicals involved in almost anything that's related to reward and relationship and meaning. And we can even see shyness in the frontal lobe, and I'll talk about that way more later in the course when we get into social anxiety. So like, shyness is a real thing. So I'm using shyness as an example, right? So shyness is an example of number two. So what this is all trying to say is that why kids are different, some of it's because what they inherit from their parents, some of it is because their brains are literally not processing the same. Almost if you look at them as a computer, like somebody that's shy is treating things as a bigger threat than somebody that's not shy. That's a processing level thing. And the fancy way of saying it's a processing level thing is neurological process. They even use the word process. Right? Keegan's work talks about these underlying, like I could just switch the word physiological to computer processes and it'd sound like I'm talking about AI. Physiological just means physical. So then this, like, I used to have a cool picture for this that I used to always show. I don't know if it's on one of the upcoming slides, but I used to have this cool picture of a tree, and it showed how, I think it was like a finch and a gal and a Gruber, and I forget, but there's three birds that live in the same tree, and like the trees in my backyard, it's like bird wars. Not right now, but sometimes damn crows, man. I love a raven, but like the crows will feast on the babies of the other birds, so that when the crows are around, the birds go wild, right? And blue jays are actually pretty defensive, and like a dove will put up a good defense, and the robins pack a good punch for their size. And it's like, honestly, like I call it to my wife bird wars, because like sometimes I'll go outside and you don't see anything. It's just the trees are like, because we got like trees all around, big like kind of Christmas tree style trees. Anyway, why am I talking about that? Because I'm trying to use this word niche. So what a niche is when the crows aren't around, it's like most of the birds live fine. Why? Because like a blue jay, well, a blue jay is a big time bully bird, but that's a bad example. But like some of the different songbirds, right, will be perched in ways that they're not really interfering with each other. Like some of them like the high up in the tree better, and some of them like to be buried more deep into the middle. And as long as they're like not shaking the other one's nest too much and getting different food and not interfering with each other's babies or mates, then they basically just live beside each other. And so you would say that they've both found their niche. I'm just taking a super long way of explaining this word, right? They both have like their role in that very specific ecosystem. And so what this concept is saying is that there's why the kid is different, why kids aren't all the same is because first of all they are born with a certain genetic inheritance, which is completely unique, with the very specific exception of identical twins. And then their brains process things differently, which was our second point. And then our third point is then kids. So this is the work of Sandra Scar, and her point is basically like, do shy kids seek out situations that allows them to be shy, and does doing that make them even more shy? And do kids that are less shy seek out more kind of social situations? Does that make them even better at it? So that there starts to become this like choice element where people, because of their temperament, tend to seek out certain environments more than others. And then the environment, so it's not just that she's trying to make this point. It's actually kind of complicated and deep and interesting if you actually think about what she's trying to say, is that it's not just that the environment matters. Everyone's like, yeah, no kidding. Everybody says that a million times, but it's how the niche picking actually means how you decide to engage your environment specifically as you, based on who you are. That we might live in the same environment, but our interaction style with our environment is unique. Is unique. Sorry, that's a lame way to end the slide, but I think that's basically the point, right? That like, um, and I always have thought of this as like a third add-on one, and it's interesting. It's just been recently that I thought that actually like Sandra's. If anyone knows how to do this, I would love. What would be amazing if PowerPoint would add in like just a really simple video editor, right? Because there's kind of no option. Like I know at the end of that slide you probably had like 2 or 3 seconds of garbage kind of, and it's like, well then the option is redo a 5-minute slide, or somehow use like a video editor to like cut out that piece and recreate the full video. It's like, it'd be so awesome if there was like, I'm just like thinking out loud, but if PowerPoint had a new edit where you could just make simple little slide, because it's always just like, it always seems to happen right at the last little piece. Maybe that's a good hint for me to like cut the rants a little bit. Okay, so yeah, temperamental patterns seen in infancy tend to persist through childhood. There seems to be quite a bit of consistency, right? Especially in things like measuring inhibition, which I was sort of making inhibition again. It's like, let's back up even farther. So we have social anxiety way down the road, and before that we have shyness, and before that we have like this what we called negative approach or inhibition, right? And what inhibition is, well, you know how when people say when you drink alcohol, it reduces your inhibition. Well, what's inhibition? Inhibition is like that part of you, whether it's a voice in your head or just an instinctive intelligence that's like telling you not to do something. I think thinking of that as your biological intelligence is the way to think of it, but that can be stronger, and so like that can be when your inhibition is telling you not to, you know, grab that thing that has fangs and that is hissing at you. It's like that's a good inhibition, but when the inhibition is overwhelmingly withdrawing you into yourself, it can become problematic. Okay, so that random rant I went on actually kind of helps set up this point pretty decently. So I just was talking about inhibition, right? So inhibition means like the feeling of nervous. Think of it as what comes before shyness and nervousness and that kind of stuff. And that, but this starts to begin around 7 to 9 months. And again, I want to keep making this point that by 6 months, their vision's like half as good as an adult. They're not seeing shadows. They're seeing like pretty good color. They're seeing about, they would need glasses if they were an adult, but they're seeing like pretty good. They're seeing from 20 feet what you can see from 40 feet. So now, for them to not get, you start to realize that actually like controlling your anxiety takes effort. That's true if you're a baby or if you're an adult. And that, and when I say effort, I don't mean like, oh, you have to try harder. What I mean is like, if you are going to control it, what does controlling it mean? Well, it means like maybe changing your behavior, maybe catching yourself from having repetitive thought cycles, maybe noticing when emotions are coming and starting to work on it. Whatever it is, it's not easy. It takes effort. And so some kids have high effortful control. They can keep arousal from getting too intense, and they're better at calming themselves down. I'd say like my younger daughter's better at it than my older daughter, right? Um, I'd say probably my older daughter, you know, she's my favorite thing in the world in a way, but she definitely has lower effortful control. Like she's just, we say she has big feelings, right? She's not a bad kid at all, and almost, I think also, this is another, like, I don't mean to be preachy, it's like, I have a lot of learning to do myself, but thinking of things as big feelings and being able to distinguish between what's an over emotional reaction and what's actual bad behavior. And that sometimes there's overlap, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's my daughter's emotionally overwhelmed and responding badly and not taking into account the emotional overwhelmed is misunderstanding the situation. And so I'm not like necessarily excusing everything, but I'm trying to understand that she's a complex human just like I am, and so is my 2-year-old. Every human being's complex. They're just at different developmental stages, which is the whole point of this course. Yeah, so I think this is like a, in my opinion, I don't mean to keep saying like, oh, I put up a slide and I'm like, oh, this is fascinating, oh, this is fascinating. I'm like so impressed with my own presentation, but it's like, I'm not really, because part of what's cool about teaching a course like developmental psychology is I'm sort of trying to introduce you to the field, right? Like, it's like this is Kagan's work right now, but it's like, and you know, if you read the slide, some of this is from a person named Bates, and this idea of like, who I think was one of Kagan's students, or at least worked with, interacted with him, which I'm just assuming because the concept is so much just the next step of it. And because I haven't heard of Bates, and usually when you've heard of the one and not heard of the other ones, it's because maybe maybe, I don't know. Again, I'm just speculating now, but maybe Bates is like a research student with Kagan, or maybe he's a younger researcher. I have no idea. It might be a woman, older lady, and I'm just being completely wrong. But okay, you're noticing me a moment of indecision. Do I restart the slide, or do I continue going forward? Biological foundations and experience, right? That this inhibited temperament. Okay, so this is the actual point. it's a real thing. And it's a real thing because it has real effect on the body. Like inhibited temperament is not just the kid like pretending to be shy. It's like, no, no, no. And know that you don't think that, but like when that kid's being shy, that kid's in not just a behavioral state, they're also in a mental, emotional, and physical state. And they're in a state that includes this high, stable heart rate, right? At the same time, their cortisol levels, sorry, I don't know, that sounded weird, but at the same time, their cortisol levels are going up, right? So like their literal, the stress hormone in their blood's getting higher. They're getting more and more activity in this frontal lobe of the brain, right? So people that are like in a depressed episode, this turns way up, right? So the when we're depressed, our amount of thought about ourselves and the consequences of our actions is very high. And you can almost say like that how high your amount of self-critical thought is and how upset you are often similar measures. Right? So there's a limit to how much self-reflection is healthy. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't, but I'm saying that you shouldn't treat it as a never-ending goodness. You should treat it as a constructive, intentional, therapeutic practice sometimes. But if you're doing as a therapeutic, this is something I'm just learning, is like if your therapeutic idea is to just break down all the parts of yourself you don't like, it's like, well, okay, good luck to like liking yourself less. It's like you have to pair that with building yourself up too. It's like you're actually an awesome person. It's like, yeah, you have 2 or 3 things that you maybe don't like about yourself you want to get better at. It's like join the club. So does every other human. So chip away at that, but don't let it for more than like, a couple hours a week or whatever upset you from who you really are and what you're trying to do and the life you're trying to live and the friends you're trying to be with and the people that actually could really use a random phone call from you just saying, hey, I've been thinking about you. Hope things are okay. How are you? Okay. The self. So in the beginning of psychology, they used to use the word ego, right? And that word's been like, talk about a word that's went through multiple stages. Um, but the idea was that at the core of who you are, you're not just your thoughts. You're way more special than that. You're, you have the ability to have thoughts. And saying that you have the ability to have thoughts is very different than saying you're your thoughts. You have the ability to have emotions, you have the ability to behave, you have the ability to experience relationship, you have the ability to experience yourself. And what is the you in that sentence is really what this discussion comes down to. And early in psychology, they called that the ego. And that what's Mike is my ego. It's my psychological sense of self. And then you remember this, like, this is why like the Freudian model doesn't make as much sense to people now, because the use of the word ego has changed so much that what Freud's really saying is you're sort of standing in the middle and you have your instincts on one side and you have your society rules on the other side. And is that not the case, really? And so then you're trying to make sense of it. You're the self. You're the person climbing the stairs and the person looking out the window or whatever. I don't know why there's 2 people in that image, and I don't even know necessarily what that image is. It's like I'm just trying to show you, like, there's... You're the witness to your experience, not your experience. And that sentence is also... Believing that sentence or not is also a fundamental difference between psychology, or like what I would consider real depth psychology, like Carl Jung, Freudian psychology, and a lot of other social sciences, right? Like even sociology, like even someone like Irving Goffman from the University of Chicago, probably one of the most well-cited sociologists ever, would say that there is no real self there. It's all what he called like the performed self or dermatological analysis or whatever, that it's all, which is just a fancy way of saying like it's played out dramaturgical, and that it's just like people are just actors playing roles, that there's no real self, it's just a collection of roles. Again, if you like that kind of nihilism, I think it's just it's sociologists falling in love with sociology That's Mike being opinionated. You can fast forward that part. Okay, next slide. So me and you are different people, and that's obvious to you, and that takes no definition, right? And it's like, if I was to say that, like, okay, here's how I always talk about subjective objective to my students. I'll say that, imagine if I'm like having, this is actually easier because we're doing an actual video. You're all going to be literally watching the same video. You know, for everybody at this point in the presentation, we're at the same timestamp. Everybody's looking at a slide that says self-concept at the top. Everyone's hearing me make the same sounds. Some of you are maybe hopefully really into this presentation and finding it kind of interesting. And yeah, it's long. Yeah, it's excuse me, school related or whatever. But hopefully, like, you're seeing that I'm trying to like at least try to make this as interesting as I can. Some of you are maybe sitting there being like, this is so boring. Some of you are in the middle. Some of you are thinking about something totally different. And we all know that that can be the case, that we can all be so at a certain point the video is what it is. If you're all watching the same video, it's all the same video. But you're all having a different subjective experience of it, right? So like the person that's liking it or not liking it or kind of liking it, that liking it is at the level, the video watching is at the level of sensation, how you feel. Okay, I think this is my new strategy, that if it freezes, what I'll do is I'll like stop whenever I notice it freezing, and then I'll just duplicate the slide and finish my point. So this idea, I started to make the point that like you watching the videos at the level of sensation, but your opinions on it are at the level of perception. And your perception, see, this is like a tough, what's the difference in your perception and your subjective experience? Your perception informs your subjective experience. You're a subject. Everybody is a subject looking at an object. The object is the video. And you have a subject's view of it. And so does everybody else. And everyone has their own subject's view of it, subjective view of the object, the world. There's a world and there's perceivers of the world. There's objects, world, and perceivers, subjects that have subjective interpretations of things based on their perception of their sensation of a real world. That's a deep concept. A baby doesn't understand that. A baby just sees things coming in and out of their world. A baby's awareness that they're a separate person, that exists in time and space, and that there's other people and other people experience things differently and all this stuff, it's like that stuff doesn't really come until about a year. Right? In this first year, the baby's or 8 months, I say to a year. In that first like 7 months or whatever, 8 months, 9 months, again, there's a range. That baby's so, like Piaget said, sensory motor. It's all just sensation and movement. And I just want to be clear, because when I say the baby's all sensation and movement, I don't mean they're like empty-minded. It's the exact opposite. I mean, that's what brain building is. Sensation is brain, right? Like, yes, and movement is brain. Like, we literally call it, if you throw me a ball and I catch it, we literally call that eye hand. Why do we call that eye hand? Well, because for me to catch a ball, yeah, I have to move my hand like that. But teaching me to just catch, like literally just like close my hand. It's like, imagine teaching a robot how to catch and then getting it to actually catch a ball. It's only going to do it if it closes at like a perfect throw that hits it like in the palm at the perfect time. You realize that can only catch, like, the eye hand part is the part that makes like a shortstop or a second baseman or woman in baseball or hardball or whatever. It's like that's what makes them impressive, is that they're getting what, or like a goalie in hockey or whatever. It's like or like a martial artist or whatever, it's like, or a boxer. What's impressive is that eye hand, that boom, 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 that's all signal activation from the brain. So my point is just that sensory motor isn't isn't saying that the baby's not thinking. Well, it is saying that the baby's not thinking, but it's not saying that the baby's not experiencing. It's not thinking in an adult sense. It's more in like a dream state. Brain building, sensory motor developmental stage. So then one of the things that Piaget said that was actually one of the signs that they're almost out of this stage is when they start to realize that there's things in their world that are permanent. Right? So I have that baby of like, okay, so why does peekaboo? It's like the peekaboo effect, right? It's like when you're with a little kid and you're peekabooing, it's like you're actually like dipping in and out of reality almost. It's like one of the reasons why it's so like visually overwhelming to them is like, there's dad that I know. Well, he's gone. Oh, now dad's back. Oh, now he's gone. No, now he's back. Oh, no, now he's gone. Now he's... That probably sounded weird doing that, but it's like, and eventually, when you go like this, they'll just pull your hands down because they know that you're not actually disappearing. But the difference between the baby that doesn't know you're not actually disappearing and the one that does is oftentimes the same baby, just age. So you're telling me that the teddy bear's there even though it's out of sight? That objects are permanent even when they're not in your immediate surrounding? Because remember, that's not as obvious as we think it is. You only think that's obvious because you know that's the case. To the baby, it just seems like everything's like almost a dream world that's being presented to it. Which is basically because that's what it is, and because that's how the senses are designed to take in information and engage with the genetic coding to build the brain. Like, it's so advanced. It's so advanced. It's like getting, even how I got all hyped up there for a sec. It's like, I think that's what's cool about being a teacher and educating. It's like I could show you like graphs and stuff all day and like just bury you in readings and be like, oh, that makes the course rigorous. Does it? I would rather have you have a coffee and sit down and be like in deep thought, trying to think about how, yeah, it actually is wild to think that we're all having these subjective experiences of an objective world. And our brain, like the one thing I was saying to my students the other day that's just wild is like, in an average day, your eyes are closed for 2 hours, right? We call it blinking. We notice almost none of it. Unless I'm talking about it right now, I notice I just blinked right there. But unless I was talking about it, I wouldn't have noticed. But when I blink, if I do a slow one right now, my complete visual field is blocked. Like if you were watching, if my camera was blinking, you'd probably find the video unwatchable. You guys are like, well, it basically blinks at the end of every slide. But like, my point is, the reason you don't experience your blinking is because you have a high-powered video chip. You know, not to use a computer term, but it wouldn't be a video chip, it'd be a GPU, a graphics processing unit. You have like your optical cortex, like your visual cortex. I mean, more specifically, it's like it's wildly advanced. It's wildly advanced. So as the kids starting to get older, they're starting to realize that they are certain things, they aren't certain things. Because you have to realize to like understand you're something, you have to also understand you're not. It's like that's like the flip of identity, that you can only identify with things by realizing that you're more something. You more identify with something than something else. Like I identify more with like being a Raptors fan than being a Celtics fan. Because who would be a Celtics fan? Just to be for a funny example, right? But like identity means, it's like the great Norm Macdonald, rest his soul. Uh, his old joke was like, that the D does a lot, that the I stands for I and the D stands for identification. But no, I butchered that joke. But yeah, that ID is like actually it's not what people think. ID means like identification means what do you see as you and what do you see as not you. And it's so much more than just how you would label yourself. There's behavioral components, there's emotional components, there's relational components. Because it's like, it's not just like how would you tell someone to call you or something. It's like, no. Identity actually means like, based on the whole life you've lived and all of your interactions, how do you actually see yourself? What do you see as part of you? What do you see as not part of you? What behaviors are part of you? What behaviors are not part of you? What groups are you part of? What groups are you not part of? What styles of thought are you a part of? What emotions do you, what kind of patterns of responding to stress do you identify with? What do you find as like, it's just such a deep thing, but as soon as the baby's like 2 years old, they're starting to see what they are and what they aren't. I say that by the time that they're two, they can tell you what their name is, what gender they are, what gender their cousins are, which ones are taller than them, which ones have blonde hair and which ones don't, which ones have the same color eyes as them and which ones don't. And that's actually, that categorization is just another aspect of this brain development, because you have to look at categorization as the opposite of seeing everything as just random. So part of them developing a sense of who they are is developing a sense of what things are and what's them and what's not. So you could see how I have there that the objective self and the categorical self, the ability to say this is this and this is, because if this is this, it's also not that. That those are like, that's what, that's one of like the main cognitive developmental skills the brain's building in that second year. Okay, so then this picture is interesting, right? So this is the rough, this is the mirror test. So what you do in this um, experiment is you take a kid and you just put a little bit of makeup on their nose, like rouge, I guess is makeup. And what you do is you hold the kid in front of the mirror, right? And what you're trying to do is, because the idea is if the kid sees themselves in the mirror and then they're like, well, why do I have this on my nose? And then they wipe it off, that to immediately wipe it off, so you'd have to do it in a way like you'd probably put it on their nose and then like do something else, because if you do it right away it'd probably throw off the experiment, so you'd probably put it on a bit before or whatever, and then show them in front of a mirror, because what you're trying to test is, does the kid look into the mirror, see themselves, but notice that they have something on their face that they don't recognize as themselves and try to wipe it off. So did they touch the rouge spot on themselves after seeing themselves in the mirror? And you see that as the kid gets older, the percentage of kids that will wipe it off goes way up, right? So that's like a kind of interesting sideways experiment to get at this question of, does the kid know they're looking at themselves? Do they recognize themselves? And again, you could like, we could poke holes at like, there's other things that this is measuring, but it's just kind of like an interesting idea that the reason it's changing is like it's seeing itself. And if you have a baby, like seeing how kids respond to mirrors is one of the most interesting things in life. I should actually video it for you, because now my daughter that just turned 3, like in the garage there, she loves opening the door and going in the garage and just talking, having these like long conversations with this one standing mirror. And it's just so cute because she's like and she's like, she puts her hands on her hips and acts like her sister and stuff, and it's like, you could say whatever you want. What is she doing there? I'll tell you what she's doing. She's role playing higher level stages of development that she sees herself growing into. She's being a developing human. All right, I'm going to keep this slide professional and not talk about how babies are only looking at the sides of the mouth and the eyes. So let me let your brains fill in the blanks. Babies need to see the sides of humans' mouths and their eyes. Because remember, until a few years ago, you used to hear everywhere that 90% of communication is nonverbal. And almost all of that nonverbal communication comes from the face. Yeah, like stuff like this is nonverbal, I guess, like hand movements and gestures, but this perceptual triangle, that's all a baby looks at. So, like, if you do this for a few years and then wonder why there's reading issues in kids these days, it's like, I don't know, I'll let you fill in the gaps. So the development of the emotional self begins when the baby learns to identify changes in emotions that are expressed in other people's face, and this is as early as 2 and 3 months. As early as 2 and 3 months, they're looking at how you're up, and like, look, it's like, what's the difference between like me being or me being upset? It's like, well, it's like here, right? So it's like the brow and the fro and the eyes, because the eyes are like, one of the reasons there's so much white in the eyes is because it helps you tell if I'm like looking right at you or if I'm looking a little bit behind you, because maybe there's someone sneaking up behind you, and there's all these adaptive ways. One of the reasons that the eyes, and I can tell if you look down quick while I'm talking, like you don't really respect what I'm saying. So it really helps humans read each other. There's a reason there's such whiteness in the eyes. It's social cue related. And so, like, look at that second point. So what am I kind of trying not to say is that if you inhibit a child's ability to read the expressions in the faces of others, that they will have a delayed ability to understand social cues. And that would be predictable. By the end of the first year, babies use their caregivers' emotions to guide their own feelings, right? So that this kind of gets to that self-reference idea that I brought up before. So I just wanted to show this because like they've done a couple different, these are just different studies trying to look at that same recognition of self in mirrors idea, right? And like you can see that some of the studies are showing like some different results, but you kind of see that the general direction that by late in the second year, early in the third year, this ability of the child to clearly know that they're looking at themselves. Like one of the reasons my 3-year-old now loves, like the example I shared a second ago, loves looking in the mirror. She definitely knows she's looking at herself. Like she's way past that stage, and she's like, now she's like playful, right? And I want to make the point to you that my daughter's like, what, well, she's 3 now. She's like, her birthday's July 22nd, so she's like actually quite a bit into the third year. But let's just say she was like, say last year, right? When she's just a little bit more, or even a little bit further back, when she's a little bit younger. And she's kind of at that stage where she's starting to notice it, that it's her she's looking at. Now I'm about to show you a video here that shows what they did is they took a big mirror and they put it in an animal reserve, like where there's a bunch of big game animals. Game animals are like big game animals would be like, you know, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! But like the big ones, right? So it's like not bears literally, because you never put bears and things with other things for obvious reasons. But there was a mirror that they put in, and animals would come up. It was it's a very cool experiment. It's only just a couple minutes, but they basically have a camera watching, and you see the animals come up. And what I want you to notice is just whether or not you think the animal thinks it knows it's looking at itself. And you'll notice even like the big cats, even like some of the gorilla comes up, boom, hits it with like a big right hand. That, oh man, imagine having a pound per inch meter on that punch. But like you'll see the gorilla punches it basically. The gorilla keeps doing display behavior. It's like, well, why would the gorilla be doing display behavior? Well, because it's a silverback gorilla thinking it's looking at another silverback gorilla. It's not doing display behavior to itself. And in that specific context, display behavior can mean different things, like in a mating context or something. But in the context of like territorial dispute is what that would be. It'd be like it's an alpha contest, right? So like if you see the gorilla being aggressive to the mirror, what you can actually read into that is that's the reaction the gorilla would have if it thought it was looking at another male its size, not the reaction it would have if it thought it was looking at itself. Then you see the chimps go up and they're like scratching their armpits And it's like they know they're looking at themselves. So they're not reacting to it like it's another dangerous monkey or another. They're not. Apes are literally not monkeys. I shouldn't have said that. But they're not just seeing another ape, but that they know they're looking at themselves. So you see the apes are just like scratching each other's back in front of it, and they're just relaxed. Some of the raven maybe knows. The leopards, like the elephants, know for sure. It's like, so just kind of, yeah. I want you to kind of know the reason I'm showing this next little clip. Yeah, how could those little cute elephants running at the end not put a little smile on your face? Okay, so my whole point there was to show that video is that what self-awareness is at the most basic level is this idea that they knew that they were looking at themselves, right? That they recognize that they're different and that that's uniquely them, not another animal that looks like them. Infants become aware that other people, that when they start to realize, see, this is the thing, is this is the jump of logic that happens, is as the baby realizes they're their own self, they're also at the exact same time realizing that other people are their own self. So as soon as you realize that you're your own person and you can have thoughts in your head that are different than mine, as soon as you think about it for a sec, you can be like, oh, well then Mike could have thoughts that I don't hear. And just like I could be pretending to be interested right now when I'm not, he could be too. And that actually a child's capacity to now think about this, actually, this is interesting, that a lot of the kids, so you can track this in kids, so their ability to sort of get someone's attention and work on things with people is basically really predictive of their skill and success later. And that kind of makes sense. It's like, can you have an idea, be the type of person people want to be around, and work towards that idea, whether it's like building toys or whether it's just like designing a game or whether it's like just having fun doing something or whether it's working on a project at school or being on a sports team or whatever. It's like, is a form of joint attention seems to be related later to language, intellectual, behavioral, and emotional adjustment. So basically all the things you worry about developing in your kid, their language, their intellect, their behavior, and their emotions. So again, engaged play. And engaged play and free play and random play and adventurous play and athletic play and risky play and computer play and video gaming play and uh, as long as it comes with play after and it's age appropriate and it's, it's like the other thing to remember is everything's played at kids if it's designed correctly. Like it's like one of my daughter's favorite things is my 3-year-old, my 8-year-old I can't get with this, but my 3-year-old is like putting things into the laundry. She loves to throw things in, and then she knows I put in the detergent or whatever, and she can press the buttons, and it's like a whole thing. It's like that's like a game to her, and she's helping me do the laundry, and it's because a game is something where she feels like we have a task and we're working towards it and it's fun and it's rewarding and there's high fives involved. And all right friends, I'm gonna have to two-part this, and I'm gonna make the second part quicker. I realize this is an hour and a half. That can't be right. But yeah, I don't think this is an hour and 15 minutes. Maybe it is. But anyways, what I'm going to do is I'll release part 2 soon, and then I'll get the quizzes for chapter 3 and 4 up, and the quest assignment out, and I'll explain it. And I know it sounds like I'm like dropping a million things on you, but I'm going to also do an explainer video that hopefully makes everything clear and understandable. Okay, see you soon with part 2, probably tomorrow.